All right, hope you enjoyed the romp through behaviorism. Now we're going to have a look at some of the other three theories. So nativism, cognitivism, and interactionism. So here we go with nativism. This term, nativism, refers to the mental faculty that underlies the human ability to acquire language. So this is all about nature. So a nativism would say everything that a child does in language development is already they are born with it. It is innate. Okay, I'm just going to read this. Language is a complex system that maps sounds to meanings. If one thinks of language development as the acquisition of the system, the research question is, how does a child do it? What is the mental capacity that underlies the human ability to learn to talk? Basically, the answer a nativist would give is the human capacity for language is a device residing in the human brain that takes as its input certain information from the environment and produces it as its output the ability to speak and understand a language. So it's all about what is innately already in the child. So this is Noam Chomsky. He's kind of the main dude behind nativism. He was born in 1928 and he's still alive. His main nativism really got its grounding in 1959. And again, the principle is there are very deep and restrictive principles that determine the nature of human language and are rooted in the specific character of the human mind. It's all about what's up in here. Again, I would stop the video, just watch. This video is Noam Chomsky on ABC, and he's talking about economics. But I just kind of want you to get a sense of this amazing mind and academic that Noam Chomsky is. So just have a little bit of a go with that, just because I think it's interesting to know that these are real live people coming up with these theories. Okay, so go watch that and come on back. Okay, here, and I'm sorry this is so wordy, but I wanted you to have this because nativism is kind of takes a little bit to get your head around. So basically, children are biologically programmed for language, and language develops in the child in just the same way that other biological functions develop. So nativism, children are biologically ready to learn language. The environment makes only a basic contribution. So unlike behaviorism, it only makes a basic contribution, that is, the availability of people who speak to the child. Therefore, the child's biological endowment will do the rest. So the child just needs to have somebody in their life that is actually talking to them, and basically then the child's biological innate endowment will do the rest. And children are born with a specific innate ability to discover for themselves the underlying rules of a language system on the basis of the samples of a natural language they are exposed to. So basically, we're just kind of triggers. So parents, teachers, we're just kind of triggers for what's already in the child's mind. Okay, so some terms that you need to know around nativism are universal grammar, or just UG. This is the term for abstract principles that comprises a child's innate knowledge of language. So basically, this is saying that any child learning any language, English, Spanish, Mandarin, they have the ability to understand the format of the language. The language acquisition device, or the LAD, is an imaginary black box existing somewhere in the brain. There's not actually a spot in the brain where there's actually a little black box. But basically, the LAD contains the principles which are universal to all human languages. So you can plunk a child down in a Spanish home, an English home, a Mandarin home, and the child will be able to learn the intricacies of that particular language. Children have to trigger to activate the device. Okay, so they need to hear the language, and then once triggered, a child matches the innate UG to that particular language. So if the child's learning English, they start to hear the rise and fall of the English language. They start to figure out the individual words, sentence structure, things like that. Okay, so people who support nativism as a language acquisition device, basically they say, well, all children learn native language. their native language, which is extremely complicated. So kids who grow up in poverty in Colombia, they learn their native language, where they're probably actually not, they don't have great models particularly. They might, but they might not. But they all learn a really extremely complicated thing such as language. And language children are exposed to does not contain all rules and patterns. Okay, so if you think about a child in your life and how much you don't teach that child every single word and every single way to structure a sentence. A nativist would say that's in there. We just have to trigger the actual language and the child's brain will do the rest. And children acquire grammatical rules without getting explicit instruction. Okay, so again, I would stop, watch this academy. Get to about 1:30. It'll say now you have to pay. Don't pay. Just watch up to 1:30. It'll just illuminate nativism a little bit more. Okay, if you are a critic of nativism, you would say, wow, there's way too much emphasis on the final state instead of development, but there's actually not a lot of emphasis on the actual development aspects of language acquisition. And basically, there's no inclusion of importance of environment. So developmental psychologists, other theorists would say, okay, the environment is more important than you are stating in here. Okay, so that is nativism. Let's go on to cognitivism. This is Jean Piaget. Say it with a little French accent. Jean Piaget. His, excuse me. Oh, yeah, good. Cough on the hand. I will go sanitize after that. Cognitivism is where language is dependent upon and springs from cognitive development. And it is dependent on the child, but it's also this mix of the environment. So it's a kind of a mix of nativism and a little bit of behaviorism. So cognitivism would say they agree it's necessary to understand how the mind works, like the nativists. But they also are saying that the environment is important. And they would say, actually, I'm just going to say, read this here. Children's cognitive development and interactions with the physical environment drive the language development. So it's this kind of mixing of the two. So again, the main proponent behind cognitivism is Jean Piaget. 1952 is kind of the rampant time for cognitivism. And the principle is language learning is part of a child's cognitive development. So we must know cognitively where the child is at, and then we will know where their language development should be as well. So children's language development relies on their understanding of the world or cognition. Piaget was very much into cognitive, that the child has to be cognitively present to learn language, but that the way that they get the brain going is by actually hands-on doing something with it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, language is dependent upon and springs from cognitive development. Developing cognitive understanding is built on the interaction between the child and the things which can be observed, touched, and manipulated. So you can see that this is this combination of nature and nurture. The child, we have to be thinking about what's going on in the mind, how are they processing it, but then how are they actually interacting with it will impact how they're processing it. So that actually hands-on interaction is key. And language is one of a number of symbol systems and not a separate module of the mind. So it's not this kind of like black box. A cognitivist would say no, it's absolutely interspersed with everything else that's going on in the mind. Okay, so these are, you might have seen these before. These are Piaget's stages of cognitive development. We're not going to spend a lot of time here on them because we'll spend a little bit of time later. But basically, Piaget said stage 1 is basically birth to 2, pre-operational is 2 to 7, concrete operational is 7 to 11, and then formal operational is adolescence and adult. And these are the cognitive stages that all kids go through in their development, and specifically their language development. Okay, criticism of cognitivism. Basically, there's always criticism of every theory. So basically they're saying, critics would say the stage theories are generally seen as inaccurate. We are now, since the 1950s and 1960s, we have more research on children and their progress. And so basically they're saying what he was stating in these stages is generally not seen as particularly accurate right now. Also, Piaget may have underestimated the development of young children. So they're saying that what he says in his theory, in his stages, kids can actually do quite a bit more. There's issues of clinical interview method. So they said he really lacked scientific rigor, that he's basing his theories on some tests that cannot necessarily be replicated. And theory provides description of development, but not an explanation. Not an explanation to why are children at these particular stages at this particular age. Okay, so that's cognitivism. Final theory, interactionist approach. So this probably is the theory that you are seeing the most of out in schools such as River Heights, Sauer, Wilson, is this proponent, this idea that language is a process of learning to communicate in a way, I'm just going to read this again, in a way that adults in one social or cultural group do. Language is seen as social behavior, and language is the vehicle to get that social interaction. Okay? So we basically learn a language. Our motivation to learn language is so we can communicate and we can socialize. And through that communication and that socialization is actually how we learn language. So things like group work, kids working together in small groups, conversations are not nice, but they're absolutely crucial to language development. So that is what an interactionist would say. Okay, so the main proponents, we got Jerome Bruner up here, and then we got Lev Vygotsky down here. And basically their focus is interactionist theories are concerned with the interplay between environment and biological factors in the process of acquiring language. So again, there's this combination of environment and cognition. Like, so the child is we need to be thinking about the child and how they're processing, but it's through social interaction. So that's the key to this particular theory. Okay, so basically Bruner says language is developed and acquired because we are hardwired to communicate. And that's how and why we learn the language. There's the concept of LAS. It's basically, this is a collection of strategies that parents employ to facilitate their children's acquisition of learning. It's basically a language acquisition support system. That's what LAS means, language acquisition support system. And this is where that social interaction, this is where parents, teachers, adults are bringing in these strategies to help the child learn the language. And scaffolding, you'll hear this as a education student. It's a strategy that is the deliberate use of language at a level that is slightly beyond what the child can comprehend. Okay, so it's like painting scaffolding. We build the scaffolding to support the painter, then they paint, and then when the painter is done, we take the scaffolding down and we move it, and then we go on. to a different spot. So you basically, it's like the carrot. It's the carrot that you keep dangling in front of the child. It's just beyond where they're at, but with your help as an adult or as a teacher, they actually can get there. And that's that interaction. They need that interaction with you as the teacher or another adult or another student. Okay, basically, Vygotsky's term that you'll hear a lot in education is, sorry, I'll go back. Vygotsky argues language develops primarily from social interaction. It's all about the social interaction. And you'll hear this, ZBD, zone of proximal development. This is the level that a child is able to do when there's support from the teacher or the parent. Supportive interactive environment enables child to advance to a higher level of knowledge. So this is where it's similar to scaffolding, but scaffolding is, actually I'm gonna go back to, oops, I'm on the wrong screen. Scaffolding is the particular strategy that you are using. So it's a particular teaching strategy kind of thing. ZBD is more general. It's basically that where is a child, and with your help, what can they do, and then what can they do on their own. So again, this idea that supportive interactive environment enables child to advance to higher level of knowledge. And the idea that conversations are absolutely not just nice, but absolutely crucial. Okay. And finally, there's always going to be some criticism of, sorry, I just can't move there we go. Of every theory, there's always some criticism. So basically, criticism of interactions would say parents rarely offer their child direct feedback on appropriateness of grammar. So there's not this social interaction where the parent is like, oh no, don't say gonna, say going to, kind of thing. And linguistic and social practices vary widely across cultures. So some cultures don't use anything like the practices described by interactionists. Lots of them, there's very little focus on children interacting in the school setting. Yet their children in those particular cultures learn languages at a similar rate to how we learn English in our Western culture. Okay, wow, those are big theories. Let it just kind of sink in, and what we're going to do in lesson 5 is look at what do these theories actually look like in the classroom, because as I said at the beginning, these theories are definitely alive and well. All right, enjoy.